The ripple became a wave the moment private interviews and internal documents began to surface, a family secret, a frightened child, and a circle of powerful religious figures suddenly forced into the public eye. If you want to follow every twist, every new interview, and every official response connected to this unfolding saga, hit subscribe right now and turn on your notification bell so you never miss a single update. What follows is a carefully written, human-centered account of the allegations, the conflicting testimonies, the evolving public reaction, and the sobering questions now facing one of the most influential Christian media ministries in the world. At the center is an allegation that began quietly inside the Lamb family, one that Jonathan and Susie Lamb say they first learned about through their young daughter, leading them into a battle they did not expect to fight. A man known publicly only as Pete in earlier reporting was later identified as Josh Brown, a trusted Daystar executive with close ties to the Lamb family and network operations. Once his identity became widely known, the entire story escalated from rumor and unanswered questions into a national conversation involving church leadership accountability, family loyalty, child protection, and institutional power. From the moment the public learned of the alleged incidents, two sharply conflicting narratives emerged. Jonathan and Susie say their daughter disclosed inappropriate touching in 2020, followed by another deeply concerning encounter in 2021 while the family was at a rented beach house during a Daystar leadership retreat. According to their account, Brown was allegedly found alone with their child while she was unclothed, and later behaviors from the child raised additional alarm: withdrawal, refusal to be alone with certain adults, difficulty with physical affection, and sudden emotional changes. They say they immediately sought both pastoral and legal guidance, and that they reported their concerns to authorities. Supporters of Josh Brown, however, claim that his actions were innocent, misread, or exaggerated because of internal tension, jealousy, or leadership disputes within the network. Some close to him argue that he was unfairly targeted and painted as a villain without evidence that proves criminal intent. These opposing narratives set the stage for confusion, hurt, suspicion, and emotional polarization among both family members and viewers. As the story continued, investigative journalists began releasing interviews, documents, and witness statements that deepened public involvement. Police interview recordings with Jonathan and Susie were eventually released, showing parents who appeared focused, emotional, and determined rather than vindictive or frantic. Additional interviews involving household employees and others associated with the ministry added further details that many viewers considered credible and concerning. These testimonies created the perception that the claims were not merely isolated accusations, but part of a broader pattern seen by multiple individuals close to the family. When the police later closed the case without filing charges, the community response split once again. For some, the lack of prosecution meant the case was essentially resolved. For others, especially those familiar with child-focused investigations, the absence of legal charges did not equal proof of innocence. They pointed out that many child abuse cases lack immediate physical evidence, and that very young children often cannot articulate trauma in ways that satisfy legal standards. The question became not just what happened, but whether the investigative process was thorough enough to confidently protect the child going forward. At the same time, another investigative thread began gaining attention: concerns about Daystar's financial transparency. Reports surfaced questioning how ministry donations were being used, including issues related to luxury spending, salary structures, leadership succession, and family-controlled governance. This second wave of scrutiny struck at the very foundation of public trust. The combination of unresolved allegations concerning a minor and new financial accountability questions created a dual crisis with spiritual, personal, and corporate consequences. A significant turning point in public perception came when long-term domestic staff, particularly a housekeeper identified as Sylvia in public interviews, shared first-hand observations that aligned with Jonathan and Susie's description of events. Having served within the Lamb household for years, her testimony provided details about daily interactions, past concerning behavior, and her own observations that she said troubled her. When a domestic employee risks their livelihood to speak out, the public generally interprets it as a sign of sincerity because they stand to lose more than they gain. Her statements intensified public demand for a deeper, fully independent investigation rather than a privately handled family matter. Complicating matters further, many began questioning Daystar's internal governance structure. The network is heavily led by family members, and roles of authority are not clearly separated from personal relationships. While that leadership model may have helped build unity and strong branding, it also means that when accusations implicate individuals within that family circle, it becomes extremely difficult to separate objectivity from loyalty. This type of structure is not unique to Daystar, but the crisis placed a bright spotlight on the risks of governance without independent oversight. As the controversy spread, other pastors, ministry partners, and public figures began quietly dissociating from the network, pausing collaborations, or reducing visibility. Some did so publicly, others more discreetly. This slow distancing suggested reputational concern rather than theological disagreement. Donors and viewers also began expressing distress, calling for transparency, audits, and impartial investigations rather than explanations framed through loyalty, spiritual warfare, or private resolution. Meanwhile, those defending Joni and other family leaders emphasized their long-standing ministry work, expressed faith that the truth would eventually emerge, and reminded audiences that legal authorities had not pursued charges. Their argument stressed protecting reputations, guarding against false accusations, preserving family dignity, and preventing long-term damage caused by public speculation. The emerging lesson is that allegations involving minors require processes that demonstrate independence, impartiality, and full transparency. Even when criminal evidence is insufficient for prosecution, pastoral, ethical, and organizational standards demand rigorous safeguarding practices. Protecting vulnerable people must always take precedence over brand preservation, family image, or loyalty expectations, especially within communities that publicly preach moral direction. The story is far from over. More interviews may surface, more witnesses may speak, internal documents may become public, and further legal or civil action could occur. What happens next will depend largely on whether those in power choose transparency, external accountability, and institutional reform, or whether they continue to protect reputations through controlled messaging. For anyone watching, the key lessons are sobering. Trust must be earned through action, not words. Families cannot fairly investigate themselves. Silence almost always deepens harm. Institutions must protect children before image. Transparency is not an attack, it is safety. This case may ultimately be remembered not only for the allegations, but for the decisions leaders made once they were aware. If you want to stay informed as new developments are released, subscribe now, turn on your notifications, and stay tuned, because this story is still unfolding, and truth always has a way of rising, even when powerful forces try to contain it.